Everyone needs a voice in court. But what about those too young to speak for themselves? We'll be speaking with the outreach coordinator for CASA of El Paso, court-appointed special advocates, those volunteers who stand for El Paso's children in courts of law. I'm Duke Keith, and this is El Paso Townsquare. Welcome to El Paso Townsquare. I am Duke Keith and very pleased to be speaking with Sandy Jackson, the Community Outreach Coordinator for CASA of El Paso. That's court-appointed special advocates. And you do something very important here in El Paso for kids who are in very vulnerable situations.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And yes, we do help out children that are in vulnerable situations, children that have been abused or neglected or in some form and they're in foster care. And what we do is we advocate for the needs of children that are in foster care, that are going through the family court system right here in El Paso County.
That is tremendous, and it is something that it's made up of a lot of volunteers. And you are always kind of looking for volunteers, aren't you?
Yes, we are always looking for volunteers, advocates. We call them advocates, volunteers, to really meet with these kids virtually, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, and also go to court with these children virtually, and we'll talk about that too, and just really get to know these children and tell the judge that who's involved about what's in the best interest of those children.
See, and this is really, it's interesting because obviously children need to be represented in courts of law just like anybody else does, but who speaks for them? Obviously they can't. If you're, 4, 5, 6 years old, if you're a tender age kid, you can't speak for yourself. And I'm kind of learning about CASA and what advocates do as we kind of go through this, but kind of take me through the steps of why CASA is needed, why it's so important, and why the volunteers are really crucial to helping these kids out.
Yes. So, the reason that we have advocates that speak up for these children is that they come into foster care through no fault of their own, through abuse, neglectful situations, and they're placed into a foster home. And really, they're there, and they're either, obviously, they've moved locations, maybe they've changed schools, maybe they had siblings that were in their family, and now they're not with their siblings. And, of course, they're not with their parents. And, of course, children absolutely want to be with their parents. And so it was discovered way back in Washington State in 1977 by a judge who was in his courtroom, in his family courtroom, and he noticed that nobody was really looking out for the best interest of the children. The attorneys were there, and everybody has their own attorney when it comes to child welfare. So mom has an attorney, dad has an attorney, the children have an attorney, Child Protective Services has an attorney, and they're all fighting for what their client wants, not for really what's in the best interest of the children. So going way back to 1977 in that courtroom in Washington State, and the judge is looking around, and everybody's fighting for what their client wants. But nobody really knows what's going on with those children. And so he created the Court-Appointed Special Advocate Program, which reached out to regular citizens in the community that were willing to sort of check in on these children, look out for their best interests. And so, we've had in El Paso, we've been here since 1986. We started in the basement of the courthouse a long time ago with 2 employees, and now we've grown to, I think, 16 employees now. So all of our volunteers that we have, they are folks that are from the community. They're at least 21 years old. They pass an extensive background check to include fingerprinting and fingerprinting and Child Protective Services. And then they attend a 30-hour pre-service training class. And then they give us about 12 to 18 months of advocacy volunteer services where they check in with the child, they meet with them, and currently they're meeting with them virtually. They're talking with their teachers, they're talking with their parents, their foster parents, their social workers, maybe a counselor from school. They're talking to all of those folks that are involved in that child's life, and they're giving a report to the judge based on what they know about the child, how they're interacting with the child, how the child's doing in school, those kinds of things. And so that's really kind of where it started. We've got these volunteers, and currently, I think as of today, we have about 160 volunteers, and we're about to swear in 4 more next week, which is wonderful. And so our volunteers are really the life of our entire organization.
Well, El Paso's a community. It's an involved community in many different respects. I see everything from the Sun Bowl Association to people volunteering, and we had a deal where one of the local medical staffs challenged other medical offices and offices around town to raise money for the food bank. All sorts of different things going on around El Paso, but this is really interesting because I think on the surface, for anybody who would like to be a volunteer, it's kind of daunting. Nobody wants to go to court. Nobody wants to be in a court of law if you don't have to be. You know, so
yes, and so it's it's something that we definitely should talk more in depth about is this courtroom that I just mentioned. And so, we have that pre-service training that I mentioned earlier as well. And during that training, which I have to say on the side, it is virtual. So that part is really good right now. And so during this virtual training on these Zoom calls, we're going to talk about how to present yourself in court, who you're going to see in court, presenting your information to the judge. How do you behave in court? I know I actually started as an advocate about 11 years ago. And so I remember the first time being in the courtroom. And of course, the judge says to me, well, CASA, what do you think? And I'm looking at the judge, him like a deer in the headlights. And so it was a little bit daunting, but I had my advocate supervisor there to help me out. And I knew my material because I had met with the children, met with the parents, and I'd already given the judge a report. It was a 3-page report about what I thought was in the best interest of the children. And so it was really just being aware that you're in the courtroom and just acknowledging that piece of it. And I remember being in there and saying, he asked me, and it was Judge Gabaldon, very, very long time ago, and he asked me, so, well, CASA, what do you think? And I said, well, I agree with Child Protective Services. We're going to do this, and this for the children, and I think that would be best. And he said, thank you, and I sat down. So we do train you on how to talk with the court folks and how to interact with them. But the best part about right now is even in the middle of this pandemic is that we're able to provide these services to these children virtually. And so currently, instead of driving to the courthouse, finding a place to park downtown, because that can be daunting in and of itself, making your way up to the 11th floor of the courthouse and then sitting in court and waiting for a long time or maybe not waiting at all. We're doing everything over Zoom calls through the Texas court system. And so there's no parking. You arrive at your Zoom call in your nice dress shirt, like you would in regular court. And so it's really a lot easier now. But, we will probably be going back to court at some point for all of these children physically in the courtroom. We just don't really know when that's going to happen. But don't fear. During that training, we're going to teach you everything you need to know about the courtroom. And you won't be alone in there. Right. You'll have your advocate supervisor to help you navigate that time that you're there in court.
Well, and this is the interesting part. I mean, obviously, it looks daunting, as you say, up front. And I imagine the learning curve is maybe a little steep. Obviously, you're going to have help in the courtroom with you. But I would also imagine that once you're in there and once you're doing it, this has to be some very rewarding life experience for anybody who wants to get involved. I mean, just talk about that aspect of it. What's you're in it for the children, but what is the payoff for you if you're a CASA advocate?
So I'm going to reflect a little bit more back on my time as actually being an advocate. I haven't had a case in a long, long time because I do the outreach and all of that. But I have very fond memories of meeting with my 3 children. I had 3 children, and you notice I said my 3 children.
Right.
At that time, I didn't have any children, but I still considered them my children, my kids. And so I had my 3 kids, and they were 10, 12, and 8. And they were the 2 older ones were girls, and the little boy, he was 8. And I would meet with them. They were in separate foster homes. And it was really challenging because, when I think back to what they were used to with their mom and dad, and then they were all together with their siblings, taking care of one another, and then all of a sudden they're by themselves in a foster home with a different situation. And so I met with those children individually, and what I would do is I actually worked full time at a different, obviously a different job, and I would work with my supervisor, and I would sneak out and take some leave time at least once a month to go and visit them, and I would leave early and then visit each child and kind of do it in a circle, just to visit with them and see how they were doing. Sometimes placements don't work out with foster homes, and so that was the case with my little boy who was 8, and he was placed in a foster home, but it didn't work out, and it gets by me. I don't remember exactly why it didn't work out there, but he was moved to a different foster home. And I worked really closely with the caseworker from Child Protective Services, and the caseworker called me and said, he's been moved, this is the address, and the foster mom is waiting for you to set up an appointment. She knows all about you. Let me know if you have any issues. And so I call foster mom, and I set up an appointment with her, and I go over on one, I remember it was a Thursday afternoon, and I get to the door, and she calls for my little boy, and he comes to the door, little guy, little 8-year-old little dude, and he looks at me and he says, Miss Sandy, how did you know I was here? Because he had moved. And I looked at him, and my best parent look and came out of my best parent voice, which again, I wasn't a parent at the time. And I looked at him and I said, because I know everything. And I have never forgotten that about that little boy. He was like, okay, open the door. And it was like, he remembered who I was. He knew I was going to be there for him. And that's really why we want our advocates to be there, is that with all those changes, you can have that one person that knows these children from the start to finish of these cases, which lasts that 12 to 18 months. So that's a long time. But that's what I remember, and that's what that gave me, was that just that little piece of, you know what, I'm doing something, and this kid, he probably has no idea what I'm doing, but he remembered me, and I've never forgotten him. I talk about him when I do pre-screening interviews every single time, and then, so it's probably twice a week that I talk about him, and then now he's 18. We haven't heard from him since. What happened with his case and his sister's case was that the parents worked the case plan through Child Protective Services, and it was recommended that those children be returned to mom and dad. And so that's what happened. At 13 months, they were returned to mom and dad, and that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for advocates such as me and my old time with CASA to really just tell the judge what we feel is in the best interest, get to know the children, and then, of course, that judge makes that final decision. But then again, they take everything into consideration with what CASA says, what the attorneys say, what Child Protective Services say, and they make that final decision. But, giving back to that little boy and those 2 little girls, that was, obviously, I still think about them 10 years later.
Sure.
So that tells you what it did to my heart and how much of an impact they made on me. And I'm sure that I made an impact on them, at least on him.
Sure. And that's got to be the biggest part of it is, obviously there is that learning curve. There is what you do. And again, you're not alone in there, at least at the start of it. But I imagine that the reward is incredibly huge for anybody who wants to be a part of CASA. We're speaking with Sandy Jackson. She is the Community Outreach Coordinator for CASA of El Paso. That's court-appointed special advocates. And basically you stand in the breach for these kids who are put in these situations. As you say, it's through no fault of their own, but they need to have a voice. They need to have an adult voice speaking for them, and that is what CASA is all about. I imagine that might be, that experience may have prepared you for parenthood.
Just a little bit. Yeah, just a little bit. And also, it also prepared me a lot for this position. Working here at CASA, I've been with CASA, actually working with CASA for 5 years now, which is pretty exciting, I guess. And I mean, I love it. I love being able to ask folks for their time. Give me 15 hours of your time per month. And actually not to me. Give it to these kiddos that are scared, and they're wondering what's going on. They're in the middle of a court hearing. All these things are happening to them that's new, that they never ever experienced before. And so it's always good to have that like another person on board with them. And so yeah, absolutely.
Well, that is tremendous, and that is one of the things that we wanted to talk about was how long a month. You're saying it's 15 hours, pretty much a month, at different times, obviously, and that's kind of up to, I imagine, the individual person, the individual advocate, once they kind of get into things.
Yes. So we require, right now, because of COVID, we want our advocates to meet virtually with their children at least twice a month, because, of course, with COVID, we got all, things are different now, right?
Sure.
And so, so that you can call them on the phone, you can FaceTime them, or Zoom call them. We do have a few advocates that do personal physical visits, but social distance.
Sure.
So the child is inside, they're waving or drawing photos or drawing pictures outside of the house and that kind of thing. So we have that. The majority of that time that 10 to 15 hours per month is going to be visiting with those children. We have a platform that we ask you to document your visitations and also any other interaction that has to do with that child, because that helps you really tell the story when you go into court. Our courtroom hearings are held about every 60 to 90 days. So every 3 months there's going to be a courtroom hearing. And we have notice for those. So if you've met with your children and talked with folks that are involved and you've kept that documentation, telling that story, once you get to writing a court report, which we do talk about very, very in depth during our training, you'll have everything right there that you'll need. And so the higher end of that advocacy on the volunteer side for time-wise is going to be if you're in court for a long time,
Sure.
3 to 6 hours. And sometimes courtroom hearings can be changed, they can be continued. So we're really at the mercy of the court. But again, right now is a great time because myself, I'm working from home. If I didn't work with CASA and I was working from home, I could definitely be an advocate because I could just log into the courtroom and be there at 9:15 when I needed to be there, just quickly with my coffee.
That's the best part. That is the best part about working from home. Just downstairs and make yourself a cup.
Well, right, yes.
It's very cool. And let me ask go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no. So we just want to really put that out there with folks, just that, now's a great time to do it.
Right.
If you're home, and your children are home or whatever it is that you're doing, even if you're working full-time and you're physically working out in the community, it's a great time to do it because you get home from work. We have our training schedule, which is on our website at www.casaofelpaso.org, and you'll get all the information that you need, and you can do it right from the comfort of your home. But it is important to note that we actually haven't talked about this piece of it yet, is that when you do go to our website, check out everything that's on there. There's some stories, some videos, and then, of course, our training schedule, as well as our volunteer application. And so that's the first step in becoming an advocate is filling out that volunteer application and sending it over to our committee, and then that's what gets the ball rolling.
Outstanding.
So
right, and it's CASAofelpaso.org, correct? O-R-G?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
CASAofelpaso.org, and I was just wondering, there's probably a way for people to go research this even further through the website. And what do they, if they decide they want to take that step and be an advocate for CASA of El Paso, how does that work? Should they call, email, give the contact information, who they should speak to, and how that goes?
Well, if you're interested, if there's someone out there listening and you're interested in becoming an advocate, you can reach out to me directly at sjackson@casaofelpaso.org, or you can reach out to me via cell phone at area code 412-260-6363, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And if you're ready to jump right in, just say you've been thinking about this for a while, or you've been thinking about giving back to the community, and you're like, I'm just going to do it, which I would love, right? Just go right onto our website and fill out our application, and then someone will reach out to you as soon as we get that application in. we have about a 24 to 48 hour turnaround on those. And so we want to get you in and get you ready. We want to have a pre-screening interview, virtually, of course, via Zoom. We want to talk to you about those background checks that we're going to do. That's one thing I do want to point out, is that that's the only thing that we currently have to have in person right now, is that fingerprinting.
Sure.
And that isn't even with me. That's with a separate organization, but we set up an appointment. You run in there with your face mask on, they print your fingers, you're in and out of there in 10 minutes. And so that's really so that we can, protect our children from anything else that could possibly happen to them. Because they've already been abused and neglected, and they're already, they have these issues, and so we don't want to expose them to that any further.
And I would imagine this is, the optimal outcome is that the parents go through the steps they need to take, and the kids get reunited with their parents. I mean, that's the best of all worlds, is that people dot those I's and cross those T's, and we get families back together. That's got to be the biggest part.
Right.
But sometimes it doesn't work out that
way. It really is. And you're right. Sometimes it doesn't work out, and parents do not take the steps that they need to take to have their children returned to them. And it's a really tough day for those children when parental rights are terminated, and then the children do become available for adoption. But again, just like you just mentioned, we really want to have Child Protective Services work with those parents and give them the tools that they need to be successful parents, so that we can return those children back to them. Studies show that children do better in their natural environment, no matter what the situation is, and even if it's not optimal. And so we really try to make it, as clear as we can to these parents that it's important that they work those case plan steps in order to have their children returned. My little case that I mentioned earlier, the mother on that case, of course, in the beginning of these cases, basically what's happening is Child Protective Services has removed their children because they see that it's unsafe for them to live there, to stay within that family. And so it's a hard day for everybody. It's hard for everybody. And the parents are sometimes, they're upset, of course. The Child Protective Services is involved in their lives. They've got a lot of things that they need to do in order to have their lives go back to normal. And so I remember with my little boy and his two sisters, the biological mother, she wasn't real happy that these things were happening, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And she definitely didn't want to talk to me at first. But after I had explained to her that I was really there for the best interest of her children, and that, the best place for her kiddos to be was with her, things kind of got a little bit better for her. And then she and her husband, they worked that case plan. And again, I mentioned earlier that they were returned at 13 months, which is about average. And we never heard from them again. So,
hey, no news is good news.
That's really what's important.
Sure. No news is good news, and that is, and that's the plan. That's what it's there for. I know that there probably can be a bit of an attachment formed, but this is part of it. It's not big brothers, big sisters. You're not mentoring these kids necessarily. You're just looking out for them. You are their advocate in court to make sure that the state is treating them and everybody, their foster care, everybody is treating them the way they need to be treated and deserve to be treated.
Right. And they're also getting all the services that they need, just to make sure that everything's okay. Yes, absolutely. I think, it's, these children, we're not big brothers, big sisters. However, it is a great program, and I do know some of the folks over there here in El Paso.
It's a different thing, yes.
Of course, because of, nonprofit agencies. But, what we do is completely separate from that.
Yes.
And we're really, really just advocating for these children, going into court and saying, hey, Judge Gutierrez, and that's one of our judges here in the 65th District Court. I visited with the child. I have observed mom with the child. It's very positive, and we think mom needs more visitation or something like that. And so, they're really looking to, they do listen to us. They take our thoughts into consideration. They don't always side with us, which is okay. But that information really does help that judge make that decision.
Outstanding. Speaking once again with Sandy Jackson, she's the Community Outreach Coordinator for CASA of El Paso. That's Court-Appointed Special Advocates. And just once again, casaofelpaso.org if you want to know more. There is a sign-up form there for you at the website. Or give Ms. Jackson a call, 412-260-6363, if you wish to take that step and become an advocate for CASA of El Paso. And just talk about, I guess, it can't be the easiest of jobs, but we talked about this earlier. The rewarding part of it is definitely there for anybody who volunteers. You say your volunteers are the lifeblood of what you do and who you are, and you have, I mean, obviously there are many, many of them in El Paso. There are a lot of people who find this very rewarding work.
Yes, absolutely. And along with those rewards of those 160 or so advocates that we have, I want to point out that throughout your time at CASA, from the start to finish, from starting your application to meeting through Zoom with as a pre-screening meeting and then training, and then once you're an advocate, you're never alone. So you'll have 3 points of contact throughout your time as an advocate. The first would be myself as the recruiter, the community outreach person. The second would be with our trainer, who's amazing. She's also been with the organization a long time and started out as an advocate as well. And then the third person, which is your advocate supervisor, that person that will be with you in court, the one that you can email or talk to or call or text if maybe something's happening, or maybe you're not feeling real well about a situation that you observed or something like that. And so she's going to be your person to reach out to as well. So you're not really alone, which is great. And our advocate supervisors are amazing. We have 6 of them, and they've seen a lot of cases. And they know where to go if an advocate gets stuck, or if they're having trouble reaching somebody, or if an advocate just needs to talk about these situations that these children are in, because self-care is very, very important as well. As far as that, just taking care of yourself, because you take care of yourself, you'll be able to help us out with these kids,
Absolutely. Speaking with Sandy Jackson, the Community Outreach Coordinator for CASA of El Paso. Again, 412-260-6363 to get in touch with Ms. Jackson herself, but also at casaofelpaso.org. Sandy, I certainly appreciate your time with us today, and the best of fortunes to CASA of El Paso, and thanks so much for kind of explaining a bit about what you do. How many volunteers are you looking for right now, or is it just kind of a constant process? You're always looking for people if they can spare their time.
Oh my goodness, we are always looking for people, but if I could get, we're currently screening for our next class that starts in March, and if I could get 20 in that class, that would be amazing.
Tremendous.
That would be 20 advocates in the class that would be ready to go to advocate for almost 50 children, maybe a few more.
Outstanding.
Maybe a few more, depending on how many cases we have. So that would be wonderful. So 20, that would be great.
20. Okay. Well, we'll put out the word and see what we can do. And hopefully we can have some folks volunteer for a wonderful and very rewarding job. Kind of a side project. It is volunteer work for court-appointed special advocate for the children of El Paso who need just a voice, a representation in court for them. As we say, it isn't Big Brothers, Big Sisters who do a wonderful job mentoring children throughout the city. It's not that. You are there for the kids in court. That you are there to represent them in a court of law. And once again, we appreciate Sandy's time with us and with you. And hopefully we get those 20 folks again. This is a great time to do it because it's all virtual. Everything is virtual right now. At some point, you will go back to in-person visits and whatnot, but it's all virtual, and a great way to kind of get your feet wet if you are thinking of taking that next step and becoming an advocate for CASA of El Paso. Thank you very much, Sandy.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Our thanks again to Sandy Jackson, and our thanks to you for listening. I look forward to talking to you next week. Until then, I'm Duke Keith, and this is El Paso Town Square. So long, everybody.